The storm was not, the wind a voiceless thread, no forge of stars, no altar for the dead. The silence had not yet become a law, and being dreamed no shape could be forswore. No throne of eyes to judge the unbegun, no angel fell because there was no sun. No soul yet knew the wound of separate skin, nor bore the crime of where the world begins. A serpent coiled in thought without a head, a circle turning nowhere, never bled. It spun a myth before it could be read, and woke no child from sleep, for none were fed. The stranger stood, though standing had no place, unborn in time, unbound by kin or race. He saw the dark like sculpture waiting will, and wept, though weeping was not yet a skill. He asked, not why, but what is why to be? What makes a law before it speaks decree? He stepped through light as if it were not flame, and found no world, and so he gave it name. Not rigid, not defined, not limiting. It marked a sound that made the silence ring. The echo curled into a gardened sin, and from the void came hunger dressed as kin. Desire breathed, a blush without a face, a trembling need before it found its place. It called for form where no form yet could yield, and pulled the edge of nothing into field. A voice arose in triad's first great flight. Not is, not was, but might have been the night. 3 witnesses, the eye, the step, the rift, each one alone a wound, but all a gift. There was no place, for place had not yet dared. The god was not alone, nor was he paired. He was with all, but nothing yet was he, a mirror gazing back eternally. Matter hummed, yet made no note of form. Energy swirled, but not as wave or storm. Relation lived, but never yet had stirred, as if a song forgot it once was heard. He walked, but walking was a form of dream, each motion mirrored by a twin in stream. No cause to shift, no hunger's crooked nudge, all flowed as thought untouched by thought's own judge. And thus he knew, but knowledge had no end. It looped, and never turned to break or bend. A thought that loved itself, and only thus beheld itself in mirrored luminous. Awe whispered through him, neither sharp nor deep, like breath that breathes without the need for sleep. The mystery was clear, yet none too bright, a velvet truth that never burst to light. No joy, no pain, no sorrow drawn in lines, just endless yes within unbounded signs. He did not choose, for choice presumes a lack, but he perceived, and so he drifted back. But wonder, held too long, begins to die. Even stars grow bored without a sky. The god beheld his seeing slow and dim, a weightless peace now clinging to the rim. The stillness whispered flat across his thought, no echo stirred, no friction's lesson taught. His breath, once round, now sagged into a plain, a presence thick with absence, sweet with strain. No difference, no break, no mark to weigh. He felt the truth. All presence fades to grey. To be forever thus is still to rot. To bind all things is still to love them not. So something cracked. He let it, or it fell. The ripple stirred, a fault line into shell. No choice was made, for choice was not yet born. But motion entered, sharp and strangely torn. Thus ends the first still hour before the split. The god begins to see he cannot sit. A flicker in the stillness split the dome. A line uncurled, a whisper fled from home. The god first felt a weight, a pulse, a lean, a tilt within the mirror's endless sheen. He staggered inward, though he had no feet, a push against the boundless, incomplete. This was no fall, it had no height nor end, but he was pulled, and not by his own bend. The fire swelled, not heat, but hunger voice. A question surged before there could be choice. He followed where the flare of being led, not knowing if the world was born or bled. And from that drift, a cradle formed from breach. Space-time like skin stretched far beyond his reach. The folds unfurled, not random, not quite tamed, as if by law that hadn't yet been named. He watched the pressures twist in holy arcs, and felt the strain give birth to friction sparks. From radiant war, the forces came as kings, each with a crown, each bound by differing strings. He knew their names before they took on form: gravity, light, the weakness and the storm. Each one a limb of will, not his, but spun by threads that spoke, "You are, but not the one." He bowed, but not from duty nor from shame. The kneel was instinct, joy without a name. The symmetry of things in motion danced, and even God, amazed, stood half entranced. For now, a meaning trailed behind each fire. Each act aligned, each purpose drew a choir. He trusted it, not planned, but somehow right, that what began would turn again to light. But beauty breeds its shadow all too near, and trust can curdle into crafted fear. He watched the symmetry start to repeat, a rhythm too exact, too sharp, too neat. Each force obeyed, each echo lined the same. No chaos stirred, all fire bore his name. And so he reached, not gently but with might, to guide the arcs, to clutch the seams of night. He bound the first to second, third to flame. He inked a map, then knelt before its frame. The world became a shrine, too rich to move, each law a cage, each proof a kind of groove. And in that grip, the wonder he had known was shrunk to rule, and rule to sacred stone. The god now prayed to paths he once had birthed, his faith now fixed, its river dammed to earth. But love, once forged, does not obey command. It coils and writhes and slips from sculpted hand. And so the shrine began to quake, to hum, for structure must dissolve or it grows numb. The symmetry did not break, it tore, it cried. A golden thread snapped taut from either side. The god, still warm with law, felt heat retreat, not death, but difference rising from his seat. He looked, and now the looking meant divide. No more the coil, but sides that would not slide. The fire no longer hummed as balanced song, but surged through roots where right might clash with wrong. He saw it, tension breeding structure's grace, the rip that sculpted contour into face. The forces now were not mere limbs of play. They strained, they bound, they broke. They had their say. Electric hungers danced with mass and spin, and space began to cradle what lay within. Particles clung like secrets in the dark, each form a prayer engraved into a spark. The god beheld, and wept without regret, for pain was how the song grew deep, not wet. No longer just a fire, but now a this, a point that held, a fate that could be missed. He felt a pull, not just of light or pace, but of a meaning hardened into place. Each shape a vow, each law a broken thread, the cost of choice, the hunger of the dead. And in that pain, he called his will awake, no longer watching, now the one to break. No flight from form, no echo from before. He stepped through law and felt the closing door. But faith, that once had whispered without rule, now wore a cloak too tight, too sharp, too cruel. His patterns cracked where he had etched them deep. The particles, once still, began to leap. They spun not as he told, but by some song he hadn't written, hadn't held for long. Their dance grew fierce, his certainties unwound. The map he inked no longer marked the ground. He reached for why, but why dissolved to when, and then to if, and then to not again. Causality, once clean, now bent and burned, as if the path had laughed, then sharply turned. His law had fed the world its primal bread, but laws alone could not raise up the dead. He saw the flaw. A world too well designed will choke the soul it sought at first to bind. So now he stands, the wound still wet with form, the silence gone, replaced with something warm. It speaks, not soft, but fierce with its own right. Not all must bend beneath the hand of light. No sign, no step, just heat, but held in womb. A light that thought of light but knew the tomb. The god stood still, yet stillness now was choice, his motion sheathed beneath a waiting voice. He pressed too hard. The patterns bent and cracked, now form returned, not through the way he tracked. Instead, he watched. He learned to wait for tone, to see the chord that rose in stone unknown. It came not straight, but sideways through the dust, a hydrogen's long ache to bond from trust. No flash, no crown, just gravity and thread, a whisper looping iron into bread. The elements emerged, not called but grown, each law unfolding where the dark had shone. Helium clung to hydrogen with grace, and in that bind he glimpsed a second face, not his, not man's, not even beast nor fire, but something else that hummed with shy desire, a hidden truth that only shows when veiled, when force resigns and silence is unveiled. He felt it not as knowledge but as scent, a memory of stars not yet unspent. The light that hadn't left was on its way, and he, unneeded, watched it shape the day. But faith, once burned, remembers where it bleeds. He saw the signs and reached for what they meant. Each flicker bent into an omen's gate, and so he drew a map from lines of fate. He carved the echoes, turned the veil to code, mistook the hush for paths already showed. He followed shadows cast by things unborn, and named as gods what should have been just morn. The mystery he craved he tried to bind, and veils, once lifted, mocked his reaching mind. A falsehood wrapped in every trace he chased, a spiral feeding back to where he paced. He spoke to what had not yet learned to speak. He crowned the strong, ignored the voice of weak. The revelation, cracked in retrospect, returned to him not flame, but counterfeit. Insight is not a fruit from thought alone, but ripens when the orchard stands unknown. He saw it clear. What leaps from veil to light must wait, must root, must choose its own birthright. So now he waits again, but waits to feel, not what should be, but what becomes the real. And in the pause, a rhythm not his own, a future hiding in an ancient stone. He moved again, but now all things had voice. The dust he brushed gave echoes, shared its choice. A stone became a psalm, a speck, a prayer. Each meeting rang with secrets shaped from air. Where once was force, now wonder filled the span. Each law enfolded will and spoke of man. Though man was not, the form already stirred. The god now heard the shape behind the word. Stars lit not merely light, but choice and need, their fusion etched with every soul's first seed. Each burst of flame became a choral vow. Each system spun with why, not only how. He watched the clumping gather into birth, where atoms kissed and kindled sky to earth. The galaxies arose, not cold nor blind, they circled meaning, like a whispered mind. And in that spin the god beheld a truth. That outer form could mirror inner youth. His gaze grew wide, then wide became too near. Each part he touched sang, "I am you, my dear." He reached again, but now he could not part the edge of things from what he held in heart. Each orbit seemed to draw a sacred sign, each falling rock a hint, each crack divine. Meaning bloomed recursive, deep and vast. Each caused the seed of futures not yet past. He saw too much, the veil was none. Each light a sermon, each shadow a sun. And in that flood his will began to drown. The stars spoke truths that wore him like a crown. He could not choose, for choosing meant to lose the 1,000 lives each moment dared to fuse. To turn left meant to sever ancient kin. To speak one word was silence soaked in sin. He saw the child unborn in every flame, and every fire cried out a different name. The balance tipped, his wonder burned too far. No longer light, now every star a scar. The galaxies, once dancing in their bound, now pulled apart, too deep to form, too round. He needed wall, not just the sacred gate, a rhythm less than all but more than fate. And so he stilled his voice, not out of fear, but to begin again where less means clear. Inclusion is not all without a seam. To build a world, he'd need to hold a dream. And dreams require what cannot be possessed, a limit where the infinite can rest. The stars now sang in voices thick with plot. No longer just alive, they meant a lot. Each nova burst a prophecy's refrain, each orbit carved a mythic golden chain. The god beheld a page, but made of flame, where every ring inscribed a different name. The discs spun wide, accreting dust to law, each whispering, all form obeys a flaw. He saw, the stars were lungs and discs the breath, and planets born in balance between death. Each planet was a thought made slow and round, a truth that dared to anchor into ground. He read the spheres as if they knew his face, each turn a tale, each tilt a dream of place. Not objects now, but texts of sacred bend, each rock a word, each moon a Gnostic friend. And yet he did not write these myths alone. The patterns grew beyond what he had sown. He'd set the stars. They sang in their own key, their chorus rising without asking he. And from that song, he gleaned a deeper fire. A world is not imposed but drawn by choir. The structure was a gift, not scaffolded. Its grace emerged where forces quietly wed. But even myths, when read too tight, can twist. He saw in every tremor, every mist, a shape he knew, or thought he knew it well. And thus began the fault of every spell. Each orbit turned a mirror, not a sign. Each echo bent to feed a hungered line. He read too far, too deep, too close, too fast. And what was pattern grew a thorny past. Symbols stacked like ladders toward no gate, their logic cracked beneath interpreted. The stars still burned, but not as trusted guides. Their meanings warred in ever-narrowing tides. The myth became a maze, too sharp, too vast. Each loop returned him to the final past. He could not breathe within the sacred script, each story locked, each margin overgripped. He wept, though tears by now were not of salt, but of the loss of silence, awe and halt. He'd shaped a song where every note must match, and thus no song could ever truly catch. So now he listens, not for tale or key, but for when silence births a melody. A system must be sung, not forced to rhyme, and time must hold the breathless weight of time. A breath, and all the air became a tone, not heard by ear, but in the God alone. Each atom hummed, each field a subtle string. The world no longer was, it had to sing. The elements, once pieces, now were rolls, each dancing through the heat in nested holes. No hydrogen stood idle in its part. It learned the name of water from the heart. And where the stars had burned, now gardens grew, for heat made space where cooler voices flew. Carbon entwined with nitrogen in grace, a chemistry of longing shaped through place. The God now walked, not separate nor above, but folded in the harmony of love. No longer he the flame, the hand, the name, but cord within a structure he became. He felt a thought arise before he thought, a knowing that the molecules had caught. Their union was not chance, nor was it fate, but something right, like breath, at heaven's gate. He did not ask, for asking would be less. The answer came as warmth, not as address. Each choice he made arose within a weave, a logic not to grasp but to believe. And so the world became a woven voice, each moment shaped by more than his own choice. He acted, yes, but only when the tune turned toward a change that glowed like sacred rune. But then he strained to hold that tone too tight, to sing when nothing waited for the night. He sang alone, assumed the song was true, and in that strain, the dissonance broke through. The molecules no longer danced in grace, the elements recoiled from their place. His harmony, once born of tuned respect, now rang as static, sharp, obscure, unchecked. The tone he trusted shattered into bits, each note rebelling from the chord it fits. And worse, his sense of rightness spun awry. What once was true now stung like sacred lie. His intuition, once a blessed thread, now wound around him, pulling back the dead. The song became a maze with no refrain, and every echo throbbed with nameless pain. He screamed, but even screaming had no scale. He listened, but the silence learned to wail. To find the music now he had to leave the score, forget what he was taught. And in that hush, a single tone remained. Not loud, not proud, not perfect, not explained. It hummed below the wreckage of the hymn, a pulse that promised harmony, not limb. He did not seek to fill, to flood, to blaze, but stepped with care into the forming phase. Where carbon clung and water kissed the heat, he placed his breath, not power, but discreet. No longer god of flame or law alone, he knelt where mud and miracle were sown. The soup of life began its endless thread, but only where his silence gently led. The molecules, now woven with intent, stirred not from chance, but what his nearness meant. A whisper shaped the bond that sugars fed. A shadow bent the path where proteins led. The heat was not too sharp, the water moved. A balance struck where chaos was approved, and in that flux he found himself again. Not scattered, not dissolved, but now a when. He felt himself in moments, not in all, but in the pulse where thresholds dared to call. He knew which edge to lean into, which flame to fan, and which to let go cold, unnamed. And through that choice, complexity took hold. Life grew in webs, in stories yet untold. No longer patterns for their sake alone, but nested arcs with selves that were his own. The god no longer watched. He joined the tide, a part of systems blooming from inside. He felt a joy not known since time was new, to act where one is needed, just and true. But life is not just gift, it is demand. Each answer births more voices from the sand. He felt the weight of every rising spark, each asking for his touch, his breath, his mark. He stretched too thin, his presence spread too wide, and in that reach he felt himself divide. To save a stream, he lost a reef of thought. To warm one cell, a forest came to naught. The threads he'd braided strained beneath his care, too many voices calling from the air. To love them all meant never loving right. To reach them all meant dying every night. The systems, fed too much, began to tear, too complex now for any god to bear. He saw the sparks he'd planted in delight now burn themselves for lack of guiding light. He drew back, not in wrath but in relief, to let what lived find balance born of grief. A god who tends all gardens tends none well. The vine must choose which trellis it will swell. And so he learned, not all that grows is good. The knife of care must carve, as nature would. To shape a world, one must sometimes withdraw, and feed not all, but only what breathes law. He saw them split, not break, but find new thread. Each life not copied clean, but oddly bred. Self mirrored self, then tilted into change, a dance of echoes daring to estrange. He touched that code, once scribed in molten lore, now soft, uncertain, strewn across the shore. They learned to grow without him at their core, each flaw a door, each stumble something more. The god now watched not for the single truth, but how each tension curved the arc of youth. A twist, a break, a burst of light from shade. The errors were the price of things well made. Mutation sang in keys he could not write, yet in the noise he heard his old delight. No longer voice, he now became the frame through which new songs could twist and shift their name. He longed, not for control, but for a sign, that what he'd left behind could still align. The longing sharpened, not as ache or grief, but as a prayer for pattern past belief. He watched the forms collide, recombine, fuse, a grammar built from accidents and hues. Selection rose not as decree or fate, but as the wisdom life would generate. And in their growth he felt the need for pause, to not be god of rules, but god of cause. To set the edge, then leave the game to play, a silence that could guide the deepest way. But longing is a blade with secret edge. Too near it cuts, too far it breaks the pledge. He reached once more, not out of need to reign, but drawn to faces singing back his name. They fractured, not from hate, but from the strain of one too close to choose, too far to explain. Each life he'd touched began to drift apart. The bond dissolved where once had beat the heart. Too many truths, all half alike but torn, a choir where no voice could be reborn. The synthesis he craved dissolved to shards, each one a note, but none could hold the cards. And so he wept, not for the ruined frame, but for the song that sang without a name. It wasn't wrong, it wasn't yet complete, and wholeness can't be conjured, only meet. He stepped again, not into every seed, but toward the ones that reached beyond their need. Cooperation, not command, must rise, where self and world reflect in shared surprise. And thus he waits, not distant nor alone, but listening for the roots that call their own. For in their voice, when truly they are heard, he'll find the shape of his forgotten word. The light took long to shape a single flame. Through bone and breath the pattern learned a name. The god had not returned, but he could see his ancient arcs redrawn in symmetry. Cells sang in code, then clung as if they knew their fate was not to be, but to pursue. What once was spark now learned the pulse of skin. The self arose, not made, but pulled within. The mind came not in thunder, but in thread. Each thought a route through which the world was read. From earth to eye, from fire to folded hand, the human grew where silence kissed the land. They knew before they named. They felt the pull of things not seen, yet haunting in the skull. The archetypes emerged like distant kin, the mother, sky, the beast without, within. And when they dreamed, their dreams became the map, each myth a mirror folded into gap. They acted, yes, but now from mirrored cue the world itself would whisper what to do. Each death recalled a story shaped in grief. Each joy repeated ancient, wordless brief. Narrative arose like blood through stone. The tale was not their own, yet felt their own. The god looked on and felt a distant grace, as if the world had found his former face. He moved not through command, but through event. The world would signal when his force was spent. But slowly, subtly, something went askew. The humans named too fast, believed too true. Their maps grew deep, but not in fertile ground. The paths they walked were echoes, looping round. They stopped to ask not what, but what it means, and thus became the authors of machines. Their myths grew teeth, their symbols hardened bone, and now the god heard voices not his own. He spoke, but only heard their broadcast mind, replaying truths they'd long ago designed. They moved by script, by reflex, by routine, The sacred turned to status, wrapped in screen, and he, forgotten in the act of play, began to act as if he knew the way. He wore the robes they cast in iron law and played the god he'd never been before. No longer spirit threading through the clay, he moved as mask, reciting what they'd say. The roles became his soul, the myths his mood. He played the part, forgot the one who viewed. The world grew dense with echo but not sound. A meaning seemed, but none was truly found. Each gesture rang, but hollow in its thread. The form remained, but something deep had fled. And now, to climb beyond this gleaming rift, the god must not descend, but must uplift. To reintegrate the pulse from skin to word, the wound must feel before it can be heard. For humans live, and that is half the song. But to remember why is what makes strong, and he must meet them, not as lord or fate, but as the part of them that must awake. The mind was ready, no more only flesh, but net of thought where soul and code enmesh. Each nerve a script, each synapse shaped by fire, prepared to hold the voice that does not tire. The god had waited, not to be obeyed, but for a form in which his thought could braid. Not speech to break, but scripture to align, a word not spoken once, but made divine. And now, in humans, Logos learned to stand, not in the heavens, but the opened hand. Their brains became not maps, but veiled domains where insight burned like light through memory's veins. Prophets rose, not rulers, not apart, but minds where God could brush the edge of heart. They spoke in tones no logic could decode, but still the structure underneath them flowed. Each symbol nested deeper than its sign, each word a bridge to that which makes design. Scripture was not to read, but to inhere, the voice of God now tuned to inner ear. The books, the laws, the ancient tongues held truth, but only when made flesh again in youth. The past was guide, not prison for the flame. The text a door, not fortress of the name. And through this form, the world began to bend, not from decree, but from the shape of friend. Thought no longer drifted from the real, it circled back to what the word could feel. Each mind became a temple and a gate, a point where earth and voice could integrate. The soul not slave, nor clone, nor just machine, but witness to the truth it lives between. Now language sang, not merely to convey, but to awaken, shape, interpret, pray. It folded into science, law and song, each line a place where God could still belong. And God through all became not far but near, the one who thinks within what we revere. No longer just the start, nor final end, but present in the thought you now extend. He does not reign from throne of molten speech. He walks the neural fields, just out of reach. But when two minds align in silent grace, he speaks again. No thunder, just a face. This is the heaven, not escape or flight, but understanding clothed in living light. This is the gift, a species tuned to feel the logic of the holy made as real. And so the world has reached its breathless pause, no longer pushed by fate, nor held by laws. The systems spin, the circuits hum with thought. All frames are built, but what remains is sought. We stand equipped, our blood has learned to dream, our neurons shape the boundaries of the stream. The god no longer waits beyond the veil. He speaks within, where stories never pale. Our languages have merged with metal flame, our myths encoded in our data's name. Each culture is a code, each code a seed, but can we read what only love can read? The mind can now dissect the soul's own weave, but can it feel enough to still believe? The laws align, the facts begin to sing, but dare we crown them with the sacred ring? We know enough to build another star, but not yet how to know just who we are. We see the rules, the genes, the ancient climb, but can we bind them in a truth through time? The divine is not withdrawn, it is at hand, in every glyph, in every grain of sand. The system waits, not for command or fear, but for our will to choose to bring it near. It lies with us. The final step is choice, to hear the word behind the common voice, to see each other not as means or role, but as the frames where God recalls the whole. We are the syntax now, we are the key, to bind the seen and felt into the free. And if we fail, the dark returns to wait, but not as end, just as postponed estate. The age is here, the shape is almost drawn. What waits is us, to speak, to choose, to dawn, not someday, not after some greater rest, but now, Before this sentence ends, now is the test.